How did you actually end up where you are? Why did you even start a show?
In the very rural parts of Jamaica, St. Mary, Highgate.
What prompted you to actually start the Entrepreneurial You podcast?
Oh my gosh, I could do big things. And people were actually inspired by me.
How do you actually approach this guest? What's the process? Yeah, please walk us through how to do that.
Why start with a book? Why not start a radio show?
What's your life's biggest achievements and what is the next big goal?
Starting my clothing line so I did that without having any blueprint.
What makes you excited to wake up from the bed and get to work?
Life transformation through inspiration.
What's going on? What's going on, everybody who's actually listening to this podcast right now? First of all, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Nikhil Sai Show, which is hosted by me, The Nikhil Sai, and guess what's going on today? We're back with another amazing guest. I mean, this is going to be a very, very interesting podcast if you're somebody who are willing to learn podcasting or create your own TV show in the future. And today we have a prolific entrepreneur, dynamic author, and international speaker who is also the host of the Entrepreneurial You podcast and TV show. And she has actually interviewed global leaders like Richard Brunson, Seth Godin, and founding initiatives that empower and inspire many more hundreds of thousands of people. Let's discover by talking to her on how she has built one of the best networks and fastly growing podcast on the internet. Let's not waste any time and actually let's welcome Heneka Watkis Porter. Hey, Heneka.
Hey, Nick, thank you so much for having me on the show. I am really, really excited to be here, and a wonderful, wonderful hello to your amazing audience.
Appreciate that. We are stoked to having you. Thank you so much for jumping on time. Now, Heneka, we will definitely get into all the juicy entrepreneurial questions. But before that, I would love to go behind the scenes and learn how you became you. Can you talk a little bit about your journey? How was your early childhood? How did you actually end up where you are? Why did you even start a show? Like, walk us through your early childhood. What was your story like, before you actually became who you are?
Okay, well, let's start from the very beginning. So, grew up in the very rural parts of Jamaica, St. Mary, Highgate, and I was this little child who was really shy, no confidence, no self-esteem. I didn't have my parents around at the time. I didn't go with my parents, went through just being an average school student, wasn't very bright. But it's funny enough because persons thought I was bright, but I didn't see myself as bright. I was an average student, didn't like math, didn't like anything to do with the sciences. I ended up at university. Before university was high school, where I did a lot of food and nutrition, clothing and textile, things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing today, right? So I did that. And then I moved on to university after working for some time. I went on to university to pursue a double major in sociology and management studies. So that's pretty much my school journey. I grew up in church, had a lot of, trauma in my childhood. And I find that those traumatic experiences are actually what provide that foundation, that fodder for me now to use as support and inspiration for others. So in the long run, it worked. Although it wasn't the best, experiences, they turned out to be able to be doing some good. Let's put it that way. To inspire others, as my life mission is life transformation through inspiration. And I continue to allow people to live vicariously through my eyes as I inspire their next lead.
That is definitely inspiring. Coming from a very unique background and still making it to the top. And the best part is taking the different traumatic situations you are in and looking them positively, looking at them and then having a right perspective and converting that into a mission is definitely an important add-on. You have achieved, Heneka, and we are stoked. I believe this story will actually inspire a lot more entrepreneurs who actually want to do the same in their life, who are struggling with those traumatic situations, and now they get a better perspective of what they could do with those experiences. Now, I'm curious, what prompted you to actually start the Entrepreneurial You podcast? How did you even get that idea? What was the thought process? What was the vision when you're actually thinking about, oh, I'm going to interview podcast, do podcasts with the successful entrepreneurs?
Great question, Nick. So when I started entrepreneurship, my entrepreneurial journey started about 2007. It pretty much started before that, like selling apples at my gate to try and get money to go to school, things like those, right? selling stockings and perfumes over time. But my formal entrepreneurial journey began about 2007, actually 2007, where I started a clothing line. And if you see my office now, so Apparel, that's the name of the clothing line. And it's still very prominent although it's not being operated on now, it's still very prominent in my mind and even in my office, right? Because it is the first business I started where I would use Jamaican expressions and put an interpretation in English, versus like that. So when I started that journey, I realized that, oh my gosh, I could do big things and people were actually inspired by me. And so I'll be invited to speak on entrepreneurship to inspire girls, young women, stuff like that. And I realized, you know what? In order for me to reach many people, I need to write a book perhaps. And my first book was 15 Hints to Entrepreneurial Success. And then the idea came, why start a book? Why not start a radio show? And so the radio show in 2014 was born, called The Entrepreneur You. And that was on traditional radio right here in Jamaica. I did that for 3 seasons, 13 episodes each season, 2014, 2015, 2016. And then by the end of 2016, when I was into my last season for the Entrepreneur You radio edition, I was searching because by then I still had my clothing line in a store, brick and mortar. But I wanted to transition out of that. I wanted to go digital. One conversation after the other lead me into a podcast. A friend of mine introduced me to 3 major podcasts, and I became hooked on John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneurs on Fire. And once I became on JLD's EO Fire, I thought, you know what? Podcast it is. And so I was excited. I was learning and leaning into John. As he shares with his community, he would do a free course, how to start a podcast. And I would just be tuned in and very zoned in into what he was doing. Got very connected as part of his community. And before you know it, JLD is on my show. So yeah, that's how I pretty much started.
That was definitely interesting to see how you actually started your own show in Jamaica, to interviewing people and then getting onto the Entrepreneur's Fire and then actually making it your life's mission. So I'm curious, what challenges did you face when you started your podcasting career? How did you overcome that?
So I think the major challenge I had was all in my head, if I must be honest, at the initial stage. And that challenge was, it's going to be so hard to do the tech stuff. Like, I'm not a techie. How am I going to do all this thing? So I was actually productively procrastinating. What do I mean by that? I was doing everything else for the podcast. I was, researching how to set up this. I was working on the website. I was working on everything I need to know, what software to use to record, everything else, getting the actual technology, the microphone, etc. When it came on to doing the actual recording, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so afraid. And the truth is, I should be, because there it was. I already had the radio show, and in the final season of the radio show, I did the Caribbean edition where I interviewed people virtually from all over the Caribbean, because the radio station would not absorb the cost to make those telephone calls. At the time, they would have to be telephone calls, and the radio station wasn't going to absorb those costs. And so I had to find a way to do it virtually by having those persons online. Skype at the time is what I used. So with that, I just thought, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard to do the actual thing. Like when I'm doing it myself, because what would happen is that I would do the recording for the radio show, the Caribbean edition, and I would send it to the radio station and they would do the edits and everything. When I was doing the podcast, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to learn how to edit. I'm going to have to learn how to do this. And I was so daunted by it. Until I started, I actually said, you know what, you've got to start. You've got to hit record, girl. You've got to hit record. And I actually started. And in starting, I realized, oh my gosh, but it's pretty much very, very simple, because I used Audacity and there's a tutorial for every question that I could perceive and conceive. There was Audacity right there online with a tutorial. I'm like, okay. Like even when I didn't know the term to use, I would just put in a random search and I would get the response. I'm like, look, this is easier than I thought. Why was I just procrastinating all along? So that was the biggest challenge I faced immediately. And then it's always the biggest challenge. I don't know if it's a challenge, it's just a reality of what podcasting is about. And it's just being consistent because I have consistently put out a show since 2017. Because one of the biggest pet peeves I have now being a podcast coach, consultant, producer, all of these things, one of the biggest things that I detest is what we call pod fail. So people are so excited about starting your podcast. They launch and upload their first 3 episodes, and that's it. You never hear from them again, right? And so that happens because a lot of persons underestimate the time it takes to actually get a podcast episode on the ground, especially if you're an indie podcaster, you are just doing this thing alone. It takes a lot of effort, right? You have to leading up to the guest, you have to get the guests, you have to research the guests, you have to do the content planning, script it. I mean, right now, thank God for AI, it makes it a lot less cumbersome, right? But you still have to put some work into it. You have to know once you've confirmed the guests, you have to schedule that, do that interview. You edit, you do your show notes, you do your blog posts, you do your social media, you do your audiogram, you do all of these things, you pull codes, whatever it is, right? So it does take a lot of work and effort, and many people are not ready for that. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. But I was always somebody who I've always said to persons, you can't out-determine me, you can outskill me, but you can out-determine me.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I mean, what's so interesting is how you actually did not let that incapability in you let take over your personality overall, and facing that fear, still doing it with fear, and then figuring out is probably one of the things which I really enjoyed hearing from your journey. And I believe that's what it takes. I've heard the stat that beyond 20 podcasts, if you upload more than 21 podcasts, you are in the top 1% of the podcast on the internet. That's like many people start, but they don't do it consistently. And like you said, you see, like from 2017, you're doing it over and over and over again, regardless of situations you're going through, which is very, very inspiring. So that's really, really helpful, Heneka. Now, I'm curious, starting a podcast is probably one of the most leveraged activities most business owners do. But the thing you have done differently is getting prolific guests. Like I'm talking about Richard Brunson, I'm talking about Seth Godin. So walk us through what's this strategy, or how do you get these gigantic entrepreneurs or business owners or highly successful, influential people who are authors, who are New York bestsellers author, like how do you get them to come up on a podcast? What's the trick? What's the strategy? This would really help. I hope you show behind the curtains, like so people can understand, like it's not magic science, but I would love to know in your own words, how do you actually approach this guest? What's the process? And please walk us through how to do that.
That's one of the most asked questions of me when I get in the space. And I like to answer this question. And I like to say to people, it's much easier than you think it is, right? Way easier than you think it is. So number one, and before I even go into that, there's been different strategy for different guests that I am approaching, right? So take, for example, John Lee Dumas, which is the creme de la creme of all podcasters. He has one of the biggest podcasts globally, which is Entrepreneurs on Fire. How I reached out to John Lee Dumas was first of all, I didn't even know I was going to reach out to him. I didn't want anything of him. I didn't connect with him because I want anything. I was simply being a part of his community, an engaged member of this community. And I remember I was listening to one of his episodes and he said something to the effect. By this time now, I was ready to start a podcast. And he said something because I was listening to his free course. And he said something to the effect of, if you send me a screenshot with your rate on 5-star rate and review something of my podcast, I will do your audio bumper. Well, say less. I did it. Screenshot, send it to him by email. And he did my audio bumper. That was the first interaction. And I continue to show up in his community. I bought he has a couple of books. This is the first one I used, the Master Journal. And I would go on the beach because I'm easily distracted. So I knew that. And I had to really focus when I was doing the podcast launch. So I used his Master Journal to help me. And I would go on the beach, very busy working from the beach and taking picture and selfie with this thing and tagging him in it, right? So I'm really showing up where he's at. And then I also got his freedom journey. So that's just a part of the story. So by the time I was ready for an ask, he knew who I was. I was really, really engaged. I might have engaged him 20 times before I reached out to him to ask him for anything, right?
Mm.
So and I think it's Gary Vee who says, jab, jab, something, whatever he says to that effect. But
Jab
essentially
right.
saying, yes, yes, right. So essentially, give before you ask, give before you take, right? So that's what I did. And so having Jay Lee as my first guest, I was able to leverage to get other guests to say,
Easy.
hey, this is what I'm doing in Jamaica. This is what I've been doing. And I'm an entrepreneur, da, 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 and I give my track record. I didn't have track record in podcasting, but I had a track record in entrepreneurship. I had a track record, in just other stuff. So I would share that as I reach out to others in addition to, hey, JLD's on my show, join JLD and be a part of the entrepreneurial youth community. So that
Mm.
works. In the case of Richard Branson, it was just leveraging my community because I'm a part of the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship Caribbean. And with that, the Branson Center was being relaunched from moving from the Montego Bay office to Kingston. And so when Richard was coming to Kingston and I was going to attend the launch, I reached out to the organizer. I'm like, hey, I'm starting this new podcast. You know what it's about? I want to interview Richard. Right. And it was such a great I mean, I have the most amazing pictures because Richard came into the room. My hair stood up because I had braids and they were colorful. And he was like, he kind of took them, put it over his head as though he was wearing dreadlocks. And that picture just went around. Right. So there was that. Then there was Seth Godin. The first time I reached out to Seth Godin, I simply stalked him on the internet. There's an app that I normally tell people to use, which is Hunter, HUNTER.io. There are other variants of that, several other variants of that software, where you pretty much can find the contact information for anybody you want, right? And so I was able to find Seth's email, and I sent him an email, and he responded, yes, right? And so the second time when he came on the show, he was launching a book, Shipping the Practice, Shipping Creative Work. Bought the book. I said, hey, Seth, let's talk about your new book. Let's come on the show to celebrate my 200th episode and talk about your new book, right? That worked. It for me? Because everybody is tuned into the radio station, WIIF. What's in it for me? Les Brown was through a mutual acquaintance of both Les and myself. Before Les came on my podcast, I had interviewed him when he came to Jamaica at a conference that I attended, hosted by Alisa Little. And yeah, a mutual friend. And when I was ready, because I know they're very close, I was like, hey, I need to speak with Les on my show. And she made it happen. Lisa Nichols, it was a friend of a friend who got it to happen. So at every guest, like I'm saying, every guest has been different, right? The strategy has been different. But for each of them, I realized that I had to show, nonetheless, what's in it for them, because I could be a friend of the queen, whatever, or the king. If it is, there's no value for them, it doesn't matter. But I had to show what's in it for them. And what's in it for them, you may wonder, oh, I'm just starting a podcast, I really don't have much to show. But can you show a track record of you accomplishing something great, of you doing something, wonderful in the past? And how can you, share that and let them want to be a part of that? And also, which is now in turn adding value to them. So don't just tell them, show them.
Love that. Yeah, that's beautiful, Heneka. And I think that's so true. Like, it's so easy to, kind of stay relevant with the guest you're trying to get and build that trust. And then, like you said, jab, 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 and get the first guest, leverage the first guest name to get all the other amazing guests. And it's like a ladder, you could always go up and up and up and up, like, who knows, you would be, interviewing many more futuristic entrepreneurs very soon because you already have built the portfolio you have actually built. And, yeah, it totally makes sense. And yeah, you're right. Like, what's in it for me? And I believe if I can add something to what you said, it also kind of, some people, like at least the biggest guests I've had, they don't really care about like the little podcast marketing, the little exposure. They kind of care about the mission of the podcast. So, for some people, it's about what is the podcast about? Like, if I share like, hey, my podcast is all about sharing the journeys, who wouldn't usually make it, but they made it to a different level. So we could prove the fact that anybody can make it. That mission statement would align with few guests as well. And they would be like, like, I'm open to inspiring few more likes, and in that kind of works as well. So, pretty helpful suggestions from your side. Thank you so much. Now let's get to a different set of questions. Can you walk us through a unique tool list you could personally use to manage your podcast, your clients, your productivity, your projects, and what?
Say again, I missed that.
The tools you use on a day-to-day basis. Like, what are all the tools you use on a daily basis?
Okay. So, wow, there's so many. So, in terms of like marketing, I use Headliner.app a lot for audiograms. That's one of the biggest ones when it comes onto the marketing aspect. There's also Canva for artwork. Absolutely can't do without Canva. I can't do without ChatGPT. I can't do without Grammarly. So I use ChatGPT to, I put in to create my outline nowadays. I mean, before I was doing it on my own, but now I just say, okay, create the podcast script with intro. This is the bio of the guests. Create the intro, the outro, the interview questions, write an affirmation, and tell it based on all the segments that I have in the show. I just tell ChatGPT what I want, and then once that is once it returns that response, then I run it through Grammarly to make sure, because ChatGPT, when the grammar is sometimes off, and it's most times in the what's the word I'm looking for. So it's not written in standard English. So I run it through Grammarly. So it's more in the here it is. It's more in the passive. ChatGPT returns it in the passive voice. I want it in the active voice. So I use Grammarly a lot to do that. Of course, good old Google Sheets is what I do. Get my running order. Calendly for sure does my scheduling. Then there is Google Drive, which I share with my team members, upload files, stuff like that. So those are the basic tools. Of course, now I'm recording with Zoom. I want to try Riverside. I think I'm going to try Riverside. I'm not so sure. Like, people who either love Riverside, I mean, like the feedback I get for Riverside is really, really great or really, really bad. Like, there is no in between, right? So I don't know. And then there is Zoom. I've used StreamYard as well, but predominantly Zoom. And my podcast editor is in Kenya. So I'm able to, just share files. Also WhatsApp. Like, WhatsApp is a big part of my communication aspect of my process, because I communicate a lot outside of regular emails. I communicate a lot via WhatsApp with my team. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
That helps a lot, actually. You have given like a clear rundown list. Appreciate that, and explain the functionality as well. So that's really helpful. Now, Heneka, if you could go back and talk to 20-year-old yourself and give a single suggestion, what would that be?
I would tell my 20-year-old self, Heneka, 20-year-old Heneka, please relax. You may not know exactly what you want to do right now, but believe me, you will figure it out. And it is going to be okay. And guess what? You may choose something today, but it's okay to change your mind later. It is okay. So relax.
Love that. And can you walk us through a typical day, Heneka? How does your day-to-day looks like from the time you actually wake up to the time you actually sleep?
Okay, interesting. Are we ready for this? Yeah, let's do it. All right, so my day, and it varies depending on the season. So now that school is on summer break, where my two nieces that I'm overseeing are no longer at school, they're at home. So I kind of wake up a little early, a little later. But usually it's like from 4:30. So I am a big old school girl, right? I love my writing, my actual writing. This is my thing. And from 4:30, so 4:30 to 5:30, I'm doing my meditation, praying, my affirmations. And from 6:30 to 5:30 to 6:30, I'm doing, depending on what the task is for the day, I'm doing something for that task. So it could be that I am preparing email newsletters in that hour. And then now it's time, after between 5:30 and 6:30, it's time to do breakfast for the girls to go to school. Between 7:30 and 8:30, I'm transiting to school, and I'm going to the hill to do my exercise. Between 8:30 to 9:30, I'm back, I'm resting. Between 9:30 and say 10:30, 11, I am doing another focused work, whatever it is that I'm doing for the day. And then at 11, if it's a Monday, I'm joining my prayer partner for prayer. And then after that, it's another focused hour. Then back to school to go do pick up, then come back, do lunch. After lunch, I rest. Then after I rest, I spend some time with the girls. Then after that, it's time to do another 2 hours. That's about 5 to 7 in the evening. I'm doing another 2 hours of focused work. And then I'm off for the day. Putting the girls at that time to bed by about 9 p.m. Right? By about 9 p.m. After that, I know I used to scroll like social media after I've had a long day. I used to scroll
Hmm.
social media to relax and use TikTok. Right? I used to go on TikTok to relax, or I would read something on the Kindle or just read something on. But I have now totally locked off the electronic devices, TV, computer, phone by 9 p.m. And I'm now big on reading, not even self-help books like I love to read, like I used to read a lot in the past because I realized in doing that, my brain was not slowing down. I was still like going, going, going. So what I've started to read now, Nick, from 9 till about 11 are novels. Oh my God, novels. They are like the new, the new entertainment for me.
I love that. That's pretty insightful. And thank you so much for walking us through your average day. Now, can you talk a little bit about the biggest mistake you have made in your journey so that we can save ourselves from repeating it?
The biggest mistake I've made on my journey had to do with when I started a sauce line. Where is it? I have it here. Nice little sauce line that I had. And to put a long story short, I had to do a legal battle in courts. And I didn't want to go through the pain of having this long drawn out contesting and stuff. So I decided to settle with the party involved out of court, do an out of court settlement with the party involved. Nick, I tell you today, I don't live my life in regrets usually. But if you were to ask me, what's the biggest regret you've ever had? I would tell you the biggest regret I've ever had in my life is to make that settlement because hindsight is always 2020, right? And in looking back, I know without a doubt and from good sources that I would have legally won that battle. And I spent
Hmm.
a pretty penny to settle out of court just because I wanted peace of mind. But it was the biggest mistake I ever made.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you for
never saw
sharing
that
that.
coming, did you?
So that's interesting, actually. And yeah, I think, I mean, it's kind of a tricky place as entrepreneurs. We use our mind, variety of things, but then if it's just too much, we want to just have some peace instead of everything we tried. So kind of makes sense. I've had similar stories as well, but in a different dynamic. But anyway, moving on. Uh, Heneka, what's your life's biggest achievements and what is the next big goal?
Oh, what's my biggest achievement? Because there have been so many. I think the first one I'd have to credit to starting my clothing line because coming from my humble background, I had no idea that I could start a brand that would allow me to travel the world, that would allow me to get some recognition, award-winning entrepreneur, all of that. So I did that without having any blueprint, seeing anybody in my family did that. So I think that's why I remain so proud of the brand, even keeping the logo so prominent in my office, even though it's not a business that I am operating right now. So I think that's one of my biggest accomplishments. What was the part two again?
You actually broke up for a second.
Oh, how much did you?
Yep. So my next question was, what's the next big goal? Like, what is the aim
Oh,
you're
the
trying to
next.
achieve?
Okay.
Yeah.
So my next big goal. So while I'm doing all of these things, with entrepreneurship and podcasting and stuff, one of my real big loves is to motivate and inspire women, to help women out of trauma and so on. And so a couple of years ago, I started a social enterprise that is called Grace to Grow. And Grace to Grow is a mentorship program for women. The women pay nothing to be a part of it. It's sponsored by Corporate Jamaica and their fundraising activity. And the next big thing for me is doing um, yeah, expanding the program to continue to mentor these women and, have them graduate from the program and being able to support them outside of the program ending. So that's big. It's something that I continue to work on. It's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I'm curious, what makes you excited to wake up from the bed and get to work? What's the inspiration, the motivation, the real reason you actually work hard on the podcast, the coaching side, and everything else which you're doing day to day?
When I always tell people when I coach them, in my mentor I coach, that as Simon Sinek says, start with the why. And the why for me, as I mentioned earlier, Nick, is life transformation through inspiration. When I know that what the next thing I'm doing is about inspiring others, it's something bigger than me. right? When I know that and I'm living for that. Sometimes I'm
Hmm.
tired. I get tired. But I know that I must inspire. But I also know that I have two young nieces that I'm taking care of, and I must give them the best experiences, right? So I have to take care of my family, and I have to inspire those with whom I come in contact. So those two things for me are really big and inspire me to get up daily, even when I'm tired.
Some awesome, Heneka. Now, if somebody's listening to this podcast so far and they might need some help, how can they get in touch? What's the best way for them to connect with you and get your help?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So I'm available across social media platforms, but specifically to my home, henekawatkisporter.com. And if you go there now and sign up, the website is going to be re-released in a couple of days. So you'll be able to, there's a coming soon right now, so you'll be able to sign up for free ebook on how to interview like a pro, right? So you can reach out to me there. You can send me a WhatsApp 876-849-2571 or email hennifer@henniferwhatkisporter.com. And earlier, Nikki talked about a podcast and how it takes so much effort. You may be listening to this show and you may be thinking to yourself, you don't want to start a podcast, but I can't bother with the work. That's where I come in because I'm also a podcast producer. All you have to do is show up and do the interview, and I produce the show for you. So reach out to me for that. Reach out to me if you want me to coach you on how to podcast, if you want to get the podcast for a book, if you want to buy my course, all of those things, right? It's all about podcasting for me. And I'm so, so happy that I got to share my experience, that I got to share with you and your listeners.
Hmm. Appreciate that. And I hope the people who are actually listening so far would be interested to getting some of your help to make their podcasting journey more easy. And that was really one of a podcast. Aneka, thank you so much for sharing some amazing insights about how to actually do podcasting, how to actually connect with amazing entrepreneurs, and the best way to convert the mindset overall to be a achiever in life overall. And thank you so much for the amazing opportunity. We are looking forward for our audience to getting some more help. Now, any last words before we conclude the whole show for today?
Okay, so here's the thing. Whether you believe you can or cannot, you are correct. And so if you think whatever it is that whatever goal you have, if you're thinking to yourself, I can't do this, you're right. And if you also think that you can do it, you're also right. So which it is that you're going to think? What are you going to hold the image? What image are you going to hold? Are you going to hold the image of seeing you at the finish line, realizing your goal, achieving your dreams? If that's what you want to do, if that's what you desire to do, by all means, do it. Hold that image of your success, hold that image of seeing you accomplishing the things that you've always wanted to do. And every single day, get up and work towards it. Movement brings momentum. Darren Hardy talks about the compound effects. The Atomic Habits by James Clear is another big book that I expect. I would not expect, but I recommend that we all read because that reminds us that it's the little things that we do daily. It's not getting up today and doing something big and then tomorrow you never do anything again. It's little things that we do daily. So hold that image and work towards it.
Makes very much sense. And those were one of the most wise words I've heard. And thank you so much for reminding us about the reality of your perception, which actually will turn into your reality again. And Haneka, appreciate you jumping on. And we are stoked to publish this podcast. And guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast episode and got a clear action plan on how you could actually, regardless of the situations you're coming from, build a podcast, get amazing guests, and actually spread your message by connecting with amazing entrepreneurs while creating a positive impact in the world. And this is me, the Nikhil Sai, with Heneka Watkis for today. And I'll be back with another amazing guest. If you like this episode, please, please, please share this with your friends. And this information which you learned about how to build a podcast is not valuable if you do not execute. So sit down, make 5 things you should be doing today to start your first podcast or continue your next guest or whatever that is, and make a clear list. Type down the top 5 guests you would like to invite and go to Hunter.io or whatever the way you could actually get them, to see your message and get them on your podcast. I would challenge you to do at least 5 podcast episodes if you already have a podcast, or if you never have done one, start, because podcast is probably one of the most leveraged activities as a business owner you could do. With that being said, Heneka, appreciate you jumping on, and thank you so much. Namaste for today. Bye bye.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you, Nick. All the best. Bye bye.